All right, well, we'll start up here. We made it through chapter 8 last time, and chapter 9 is a kind of some more of the same of 8. For those of you that weren't here last week or weren't able to watch or whatever, you can tell Paul hates talking about money because he talks about it for, I don't know, probably 1,000 words here and never really actually says the word money. And he's talking about it. And that's kind of chapter 8 and chapter 9. I have prepared through the middle of chapter 11. So we're going to try to make it all the way through there. But we'll see. A lot of what he's talking about in 8 and 9, when he's talking about money, is really talking about like he's going back and kind of fishing out what of things that he's said already. And as we kind of go into chapter 10, he's going to do that even more. Here, hold on.
Verses 6 and 7 are pretty popular verses when they're talking about.
Yeah.
I guess I could move over.
Hold on.
We've been eating.
1 second, everyone. Someone's got a website question that's trying to get on here. Come on, what's my computer doing? Did you guys break my computer? Cannot minimize Zoom when you're recording. What? What? All right.
What?
What? Like that's the let's see here. Great. Let me just write what it needs to be then. ESL.com/study.
Hopefully they can't hear you.
Let's see here. Lee's trying to get in. She says she's having problems finding it. So, everyone else found it. Come on, Lee. Let's see.
No, there's that computer on her desk.
Yeah. There it is. There she is. There she is. All right. So, can I make this smaller? Yes. All right. Are you in, Lee? Can't see her. There she is. All right. Yeah. There we go.
Mute?
All right. Cool. There she is. You're on mute too. So but that's all right. That's all right. We don't need to hear you anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Gene.
so sorry you're feeling sick and all that.
I don't know. It's okay. I'm alive.
Yeah, you're still alive? All right.
Barely, huh?
Barely.
Barely.
It's all right. Well, it's good seeing everyone. So we're going through 8 and 9 here. 9 is just more of the business of 8. So we'll kind of just get into reading this and
Didn't we finish 8 last week?
Yeah, we went through 8. We finished 8. We kind of flew through 8, but we kind of went through it. And 9's we're gonna fly through 9 too. There's not a ton of new and interesting stuff. It's 9, 8 and 9 are kind of obvious. He's set up and now he's doing the ask. And so breaking down the ask isn't the most beneficial. So, all right. 9 verses 1 through 5. I'll be reading this first time through. Actually, I'm going to read it in my weird translation, my Kingdom New Testament. So all right, and that's 1 through 5. Yeah. So when it comes to service, you are doing for God's people. I see you. I don't need to write to you. For I know your eagerness, and indeed I boasted about the Macedonians, saying that Achaia had been ready since last year. Your enthusiasm has stimulated most of them into action. I have sent the brothers, so that our boasting about you in this respect may turn out to be true, so that you may be ready, just as I said you were. Otherwise, imagine what it would be like if people from Macedonia came with me and they found out you weren't ready. That would bring shame on us in this business, not to say on you. So I thought it necessary to exhort the brothers that they should go on to you in advance and get everything about your gracious gift in order ahead of time. You've already promised it, after all. Then it really will appear as a gift of grace, not as something that has had to be extorted from you. So remember, what we're talking about here is that Corinth is a wealthy just region, a town. So most likely this church probably has a considerable amount of wealth too. And as we're going to see as we continue going into chapter 10, that Paul treats them differently because of this. And it makes sense. As we get down there, we'll see it, and it'll make sense why he's treating them differently. But you can tell he's treating them differently here too, because the Macedonians are not a wealthy region. And it's almost like him saying, like, hey, when Macedonia heard of the big gifts that you're giving, that encouraged them in their own gift. And that's such an encouraging word when you can tell someone, it's like, hey, you are encouraging to these other believers by what you did, like that's, so he's kind of talking about those things there. And let's see, and he keeps on going just back and forth saying, yeah, we thank you that you're giving this gift, basically, like, please give it. You've promised it. please, you promised this gift. Like, please give it. Like, we're bringing a whole envoy of people to you. Like, please give the gift. Like it sure would be sad if you didn't.
Put a guilt trip on.
Yeah, like that. And that kind of sounds like a guilt trip. And that's and like it's kind of. I think it's riding that line between a guilt trip and a, like, hey, we're like, don't embarrass me, please. Like that's like you said that you'd bring this, and then he and they have kind of been in a little bit of a disagreement. So much so, we're going to get into that in 10, that they have been listening to these other people. These super apostles, we're about to get to where he quotes that. They've been listening to them, and so I think he's hedging. It's like please type of thing. I don't know. Did anyone have any thoughts?
But then in verse 7 coming up, I think he describes it very, very well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So determine in your heart. So let's read 6 through 9. This is what I mean. Someone who sows sparingly will reap sparingly as well. Someone who sows generously will reap generously. Everyone should do as they have determined in their heart, not in a gloomy spirit or simply because they have to, since God loves a cheerful giver. And God is well able to lavish all his grace upon you, so that in every matter, in every way, you will have enough of everything, and may be lavish in all your own good works. Just as the Bible says, they scattered their seed and they gave to the poor, and their righteousness endures forever. We see that just like what Ed says. So he goes into the someone's making a lot of noise. Do we know who that is? Can you guys mute yourselves when you're not going? It's very loud in here. Okay, all right. So we'll see if that solved it. I don't know what it was. All right, but thank you. So let's see here. So just like what Ed said, that someone who sows generally can reap generously. Like that's that idea that it's like, yes, please give this. But what we see, because if you look at the patterns that he's already been talking about, is this cross-shaped life. This life that you're not going for the glory. You're not going for all those things. Like oftentimes when we're in this realm of following after the Messiah, oftentimes that road leads us down roads of crosses, of pain and that hurt. And I think he's connecting that here, that it's like you're not giving, as Ed Furness just said, from like a gloomy, but you're following, even when you're making sacrifices, you're still following with joy through the cross and into the resurrection. So that's kind of, and that's kind of how I see that he's talking about that, as he's talking about lavishing grace upon them, and just as what's he quoting there? He's quoting Psalm. I don't know what he's quoting. I thought I wrote it down. There at the end of 9.
Who gives the poor his righteousness endures
I think it's Psalm 1, verse 5.
Galatians 5:2.
Galatians 5:2. Well, he'd be quoting himself then. Like that. That's
I've got Psalm 68, 19.
Psalm 68. So there's probably a bunch of.
Yeah.
So Cheryl says hers says 1. This is probably a reoccurring pattern throughout the scriptures that they all kind of sound like this: freely scatter their gifts to the poor, and righteousness endures forever. So it's probably in a few places. It sounds like the Psalms or the Proverbs. So okay. And so he continues on, and I'll finish reading chapter 9 here. The one who supplies seed to be sown and bread to eat will supply and increase your seed and multiply the yield of your harvest. You will be enriched in every way, in every single-hearted goodness, which is working through us to produce thanksgiving to God. The service of this ministry will not only supply what God's people so badly need, it will also overflow with many thanksgivings to God. Through meeting the test of this service, you will glorify God in 2 ways. First, because of your confession of the faith in the Messiah's gospel has brought you into proper order. And second, because you have entered into genuine and sincere partnership with them and with everyone. So what's more, they then will pray for you and long for you because of the surpassing grace God has given you. Thanks be to God for his gift, the gift we can never fully describe. So I think it's interesting that he starts kind of talking about, it sounds like to me like he's alluding to this gift for this Jerusalem congregation, for these other churches, but not only that, but also kind of joining in this partnership in the gospel for this mission going to this poor church in Jerusalem, that all these other churches are kind of working together to go down there and have this opportunity to work together. It's kind of like I hear from people who travel, like I think, Ed, you talked about some of this when you went up to Pennsylvania, and I know Gloria has done this too, where you'll go visit other churches, and that's sometimes at least, right? Like sometimes at least that it's like, oh, hey, look at what this other church is doing, and things like that. And to me, that's kind of what it sounds like there. It's like, hey, look, we're all working in the church together to do this common mission type of thing. And I think that's his thing that he's doing with the first and the second thing in verse 13. Because your confession of faith in the Messiah's gospel has brought you into proper order, and because you have entered into genuine, sincere partnership with them and everyone. So it's kind of that coming together idea there, with that 13 and 14 and that ministry of the gospel. I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts on this before we move on to 10? Nothing? All right. We got through it. No confusion whatsoever, right? So all right. So chapter 10. Why did I write that? Okay. So as a kind of a description, kind of getting us in here, Paul starts talking about these super apostles here. He starts talking about other people. We don't know who he's talking about here. There's a few people that he talks about. We don't know who he's talking about because he gets right into it where he starts talking about boasting, and he says that others have puffed themselves up. We don't know who he's talking about. Like it could be someone has come to the Jerusalem church area and has become like an apostle in that thing, but they kind of have their own like gospel kind of idea coming out of it. It could be someone else. It could be a situation like which is outlined in Acts. I think it happens a couple times in Acts where there's somebody sees the apostles doing these amazing healings and all that stuff, and they're like, how are they doing that? They're doing it in Jesus' name, and then they start charging people in order to receive healings in Jesus' name, and then it usually doesn't end well for them, at least in the book of Acts, right? like that's, and so that's that could be what's going on there. But what's interesting is that Paul is using this rhetorical argument, and he says that he's going to try a little boasting. Like it's so he's seeing these people puff themselves up, kind of boasting in their ministries and like how all these things look, and then he goes, well, I can do a little boasting too. Like that's and so he then goes back and he has us recall what he said like in chapter, I think it's 3 and 4, when he was talking about the marks of what it means to be an apostle, to be a Jesus follower, that's kind of standing with Jesus there, and so yeah, all right. So that's kind of the setup for this chapter. I'm going to read from the NIV. I don't know, till I feel like stopping. It's not going to be super long. So chapter 10, verse 1. By the humility and gentleness of Christ, I appeal to you. I, Paul, who am timid when face to face with you, but bold towards you when away, I beg you that when I come, I may not have to be as bold as I expect to be towards some people who think that we live by the standards of this world. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every presentation that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. As I was reading there, I realized that you guys didn't request your little easels.
I just wondered if somebody made off with them.
No, they live right there. I didn't think about it. So we have these little easels that were donated to the class.
So we don't have to break our necks.
Yeah, exactly. and okay, so when we're talking to this, you can see what Paul's doing, and this wild translation that I have, he puts it like this. This is verse 1 of chapter 10. Think of the Messiah, meek and gentle. Then think of me, Paul. Yes, Paul himself. and I'm making his appeal to you. You think of me like I'm humble when I'm face to face with you, but I'm bold when I'm away from you. Like, I love that he's talking about that, because he's talking about, like, his letters are what seems to really kind of cause the rift. Like, his letters have been what's caused the issue. And he says, I'm humble when I'm with you, but I'm bold when I'm away from you. Please don't put me into the position of having to be bold when I'm with you, of having to show how confident I dare to be when I'm standing up to people who think we are behaving in merely human ways. Mm-hmm. Like, his translation in this section it's the same, but it's a lot different and stuff like that. Is there any meaningful changes of words that need to be pointed out so far?
I may not seem as if I would terrify you by the letters.
Yeah. But I think Paul is, this chapter, I think he's kind of starting to stand on his authority that he has, and he's going to go into, like, these guys are kind of shysters. Like, he has some choice language for them, and we're going to get into that here in a little bit. But you can see what he's doing. He's like, you're going to see that I'm confident, but it's not confidence in the human way of doing things. And that's a key way to think about it right there. So he describes that then, and we're in verse 3. Yes, we are mere humans, but we don't fight war in a merely human way. The weapons we use for the fight, you see, are not merely human. They carry a power from God that can tear down fortresses. So, like, the weapons we use for the fight, they're not. It's just, he's talking about the spiritual stuff, and he says what they do. And this is an interesting phrase. Halfway through 4, we tear down clever arguments and every proud notion that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take every thought prisoner and make it obey the Messiah. So you can see what he's doing here is that he's saying there's people around you that have puffed themselves up, but they've only puffed themselves up in, like, the ways of the world, like and the ways over there, but we see that the power of God can tear down any of those things, and he says, right after he talks about the power of God, he goes, we tear down clever arguments. Let's see, that's the end of chapter 4. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds, is what it says in the thing. My notes on this is it has this sense of, like, we're fighting a spiritual battle, and that's kind of, as we're talking about those clever arguments, that's kind of this kind of spiritual battle. And what Paul is doing, and if you guys remember what it meant to have a hermeneutical mind, that there are 3 levels of interpretation. That there is, level 1 is just looking at the words on the page. The second one is, why is the author writing those words on the page? And then level 3 is what's going on around the author that caused him to want to write those words. Those are like the 3 levels as we're looking at any text and looking in there. And so to go to kind of level 2 there, Paul is trying to dismantle. You remember, like, we have to think about what Greece is known for at this time, what the Greek mind, what the Roman minds are known for. It's like stoicism and this kind of intellectual kind of rigor and argument, And I think that's what he's talking about when he's talking about fortresses and things like that. That he's saying, like, you see all these, like, clever arguments, these fortresses that are being built up and maintained, like, but God can tear them down at any time. Paul understands with the Stoic mind. So like we've heard of Stoicism, that would have been really big during this time. Also, one that's not as popular is Epicureanism. Yes, yes, exactly. Has anyone heard of that before? Epicureanism. Yeah. So that's something that is still very deep inside of the Western church, kind of Epicurean thought. It's still like what we would consider, like if you think of like just American Christianity, it would like kind of resemble Epicurean thought a lot, type of thing, and that and Gnosticism, but they're kind of kissing cousins. Gnosticism is also a big issue still in the church, just because we talk about spiritual things all the time, and that's Gnosticism's goal. And just remember, whenever we're dealing with spiritual things, the spiritual is always in service to the physical. That's Christian. Like you look at the creation story, God created. How did God save the creation? He became man. And then the resurrection is just like he didn't resurrect as a spirit or anything like that. He was resurrected as a physical body. That's why in the creed we all we do is we talk about what Jesus did. We don't really talk about his teachings or anything like that, because the creeds are trying to fight Gnosticism. And so we're talking about these things, and so he's trying to take captive their kind of rhetorical arguments. And all right, so verse 6. So we are holding ourselves in readiness to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. And so he's going into those full arguments again. And so that whole obedience and disobedience thing, if they are still in sin, that's not going to work. It's kind of what he's saying there. It's not going to work out. So all right. So then continuing through here, verse 7, and I have my translation here. Look at what's in front of your face. If anyone trusts that they belong to the Messiah, let them calculate it once more. Just as they belong to the Messiah, so also do we. For if I do indeed boast a little too enthusiastically about the authority which the Lord has given me, which is for building you up, not for pulling you down, I shan't be ashamed. That's this guy. This guy's British. Shan't. That's a British coming out.
Well,
Yeah. I wouldn't look to. I wouldn't want to look as if I were trying to frighten you with my letters. I know what they say. His letters are serious and powerful, but when he arrives in person, he is weak, and his words aren't worth bothering about. In verse 11. Anyone like that should reckon on this. The way we talk in letters when we're absent will be how we behave when we are present. So what it appears to me is that he does not want to lord it over them in their faith. He's not wanting to, like, this is how it's got to be, but they need to recognize that the living God who works in the Spirit is working with Paul. And Paul has said in the past that there is a cost to his life. That's what we were talking about in chapter 4 and all that there's a cost to all this. The cost is the cross. And that can seem difficult to them. And that can seem difficult to us. So yeah. So verse 12. We do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. I just read the NIV there.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's, is it meaningfully different? No.
Do not show good sense.
Do not show good sense. So like verse 12 here in my notes is there's confrontation between him and others. And he's basically saying like we have been following like Jesus here. Let's keep on going here. So verse 13. But when we boast, we don't do so without having something to measure ourselves by. We boast according to the measure of the rule God has given us to measure ourselves by. And that rule includes our work with you. So that's an interesting thing. And he's going to continue talking about that in verse 14. But in the NIV, in his translation, he called it measured. In the NIV, it says, we will not boast beyond proper limits, but will confine, I think that's that measure there, we'll confine our boasting to a sphere of service God has himself assigned us to. This is kind of an interesting idea that he's talking about here, because I think he's kind of. Let me read 14 and we'll kind of get into this. 14. We weren't going beyond our assigned limits when we reached you. We were the first to get as far as you with the gospel of the Messiah. All right, and 15 is talking about kind of the same thing. But this idea of this measuring of this limits of all this, it's almost like he's talking about kind of this slowdown. And when I was looking at all this, what seemed to be a consensus that I was kind of getting was that there might be this territory that these different teachers have. It's like, well, I'm going to go up into here. I'm going to go up into here, and so some may be accusing Paul of just kind of, well, you're just going wherever you want. You're just going willy-nilly. That could be one of the arguments that they have against Paul, is that, oh, you're just going anywhere and everywhere. Like that's you have no limits to what you're doing, Paul. You don't have it over there. And so and it's kind of this idea of like, how much of the work are you supposed to do? So verse 15. We don't boast without a measuring rule in the work someone else has done. This is what we hope for, that as your faith increases, we will be given a much larger space for work according to our rule. So let's see, what does it say in the NIV? Let me read the NIV. Neither do we go beyond our limits by boasting of the work done by others. Our hope is that as your faith continues to grow, our sphere of activity among you will greatly expand. So, as I was kind of reading here, let's see, that you're like, what's this limit? Like, what's this limit on his ministry? What is this kind of talking about? Galatians Chapter 2 kind of talks about this a little bit. And I wanted to open that up and look at it real fast. So, if you look here in Galatians Chapter 2, Paul says, like, then for 14 years I went up again to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas, and he's talking about going around these different things. Verse 3 is not even Titus who is running my race in vain, yet even Titus who was with me was compelled to be circumcised. Let's see here. So as for those who are held in high esteem, this is verse 6. As for those who are held in high esteem, whatever they were makes no difference to me. God does not show them favoritism. They added nothing to my message. On the contrary, they recognized that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised. That's the key thing right here. Just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God, who was at work in Peter as an apostle to the circumcised, was also at work in me as apostle to the Gentiles. So as I was kind of reading this and talking about these limits, because I had never, in all my reading of the 2 Corinthians, I'd never really given this any thought, really, any substantial thought, is that there might be this understanding that the churches have of some territory that the disciples have in their teachings. And that here, I've always read Galatians Chapter 2, and when it talks about Peter going to the circumcised and Paul going to the uncircumcised, I've always took that as kind of like, oh yeah, Peter was doing the Jews and then Paul was doing everyone else. Kind of more of a conceptual thing. But the commentaries I was reading as I was getting ready for this were saying, no, it might have been an actual physical agreement. Like Peter is sticking around these churches that are heavy with a Jewish population, and Paul's over here, and there were probably other agreements going forward. And I like that was very interesting to me. I don't know if that's definitely the case or not, but I thought that was interesting. I'd never heard that perspective before.
Argue if you go into verse 11 on that 2:11.
Yeah.
Peter came to Antioch. I withstood him to his face. So must have been arguing with him then.
Yeah.
For that reason.
And so that's also that goes back to our talk we were doing we don't know who these super apostles are. We don't know who they were. We do know that Paul was in an argument with Peter though. Like we know that. And so we don't really think it was Peter or any of ones from Peter's really cohort, but
It also mentions James, Cephas, and John in that chapter. So there's other ones involved.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like today's various religions and synods within religions.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like, I mean, even in our Lutheran umbrella, we have ELCA and LCMS and WELS, and that's something that we're.
It's actually like about 15.
Oh, I know. There's a ton of
Everybody has
them.
their own opinion, right?
Everyone's got their own opinion and things like that, and it's kind of interesting to look at this kind of through that lens, to take the conceptual away just for a little bit. And look at it, it's like this may have a very practical thing, and that the people in the church in Corinth are using that as an argument to not listen to Paul. And it's like he's got no jurisdiction here, type of thing. And so I thought that was interesting, and I had never really considered that before. And it kind of, just as Ed said, we have this sense of all these other church bodies, and we don't really get along with them all that well. We should probably get along with them a little better. I think that showing our sin a little bit whenever we're arguing with them like that, And so that
I think he was defending his authority, that he's teaching the gospel, that he's teaching about Christ, where the false teachers are more puffing themselves up and making them look at us, look what we've got because God blessed us and you can do the same thing, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I think he was kind of defending his thinking on that.
Yes. I mean, that's especially where he goes in the argument is definitely on his mind. Everything you just said there, Cheryl. Like as we continue reading down through here and we get into 11, where he uses the super apostle word, like that is definitely where he's going. Like he's defending his ministry here. Like he's definitely been dealt a blow in his ministry in the Corinthian church. So that's kind of what's going on. Let's see, how many more notes did I have in this section? So verse 16, my note is we don't know what's going on. So verse 16, let's see here. So we just finished talking about a larger space for work according to our rule. So verse 16, which is to announce the gospel in the lands beyond you, not to boast in what has already been accomplished through the rule someone else has been given. So we don't know what was going on, but that if there is a disagreement about what to do, it seems like he's saying, like, we're not supposed to boast about, like, look at my huge tracts of land, like look at all of this stuff and then stop. It's like we're supposed to take that and then continue moving. But we don't know why that sentence is written. Like there's no clues. Like we can conjecture.
My note says that he was thinking about Spain.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what my commentary said too. Is that you can tell Paul is having he's on this plan to eventually get to Spain. We're not sure if he ever made it up there, but if he did, he could have also like gone up through up to the Britons and France and the Germanic tribes and all that stuff too. Like that's that could have been what happened as he's going on there. That's definitely what he's talking about. That's definitely what he's talking about there. So all right. So verse 17, anyone who boasts in the Lord, who is it after all who gains approval? It isn't the person who commends himself. It's the person who the Lord commends. And so, like, that's an odd. What do you guys think of that, of those two verses there, 17 and 18? You have any thoughts on them?
Pastor, I'll go back. My footnote back from verse 12 and 13 kind of summarizes the whole thing, I think. It says, this is a footnote. When we compare ourselves with others, we may feel pride because we think we're better. But when we measure ourselves against God's standards, it becomes obvious that we have no basis for pride. Don't worry about what others' accomplishments are. Instead, continually ask, how does my life measure up to what God wants? How does my life compare to Jesus?
Yeah, like I think that's really describing that 17 and 18 there.
Agreed.
Yeah, like that's over there, because I have some notes, but my notes are kind of trash right there. So like that's like I don't know what I wrote like over there, but I think your footnote like really kind of describes that well about what's going on there. So so kind of following after God. So, all right, let's get into chapter 11. Like I said, I'd like to get through 15 if we can. All right. So chapter 11, verse 1. I'd be glad if you would bear with me just a little bit of foolishness. Yes, bear with me, please. That's kind of funny, I think. Because think about what he's been talking about. He's been talking about boasting and all these things. That's like, all right, it's almost like it's a little joke. Like, let's just bear with just a little bit of foolishness here. A little bit, like Paul's making an argument, He's making an argument here. I am jealous over you, and it's God's own jealousy. I arranged to marry you off like a pure virgin to be the one man I presented you to, namely the Messiah. But the serpent tricked Eve with its cunning. And in the same way, I'm afraid that your minds may be corrupted from the single-mindedness and purity which the Messiah's people should have. So notice what he does there. Think about all of our language that we kind of use. A lot of it's Pauline, where the church is the bride of Christ. Like he's definitely hitching himself to that horse, being the bride of Christ. But also he goes into what is the problem. He goes into writing about the fall, and it's interesting how he puts it. So we've been setting up this whole argument this whole time about what it means to be an apostle, what it means to follow in Jesus' footsteps, and all those things, and how we see that those ministries are for reconciliation, and reconciling and all that. And then he starts talking about what I think the theological nugget of this whole thing is that you're like Adam and Eve with the Messiah, this kind of language. He's using it loose. He says, I'm speaking foolishness. But just as the evil one, the serpent, tricked Eve with its cunning, so he's talking about those rhetorical styles again, with its cunning, in the same way I'm afraid that your minds will be corrupted from the single-mindedness and purity from which the Messiah should have. And so he's like, I think he's kind of saying like, hey, be on your guard. And I think this is a good warning for all of us too, that it's easy to just kind of fall into like evil one's voice and teaching, and kind of go after this kind of other way, like that. It's easy to kind of go after these other things.
It's kind of like TV. It's kind of like the TV preachers that preach prosperity and only goodness is going to come if you believe in God.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's also like, I think another, it's right along with the same prosperity preachers, but I think it's a little more cunning and that's why I preach on it all the time. But our obsession with like political power, like and you see some people they become obsessed with it, where God is only blessing these people and he's only cursing these people. And like, I think that's why I talk about it all the time, because it's so easy to feel like that stuff matters more than it does, and it's so easy to listen to that serpent. And just like the prosperity preachers, like they're like, and it's all the same message. It's all the same message. The prosperity preachers, that politics stuff, and what we see, the super apostles, it's all the same message of, if you do A, you get B. Like, and that's, and Paul basically saying, no.
Or the fire and brimstone who say, if you don't do this,
If you
From a woman's standpoint, it makes me think, don't go after somebody like Tammy Faye.
I've been thinking about her this whole time.
There's a new Tammy Faye Baker movie out. Did it come out yet? I can't remember. It's big. It's got Jessica Chastain, who's big. She was in Zero Dark 30 and stuff like that. In Interstellar, great actress. But it's I don't know. I haven't watched it yet, but that's funny you mentioned Tammy Faye. I've been hearing a bunch of stuff about the movie. I've heard that it's good. I don't know yet though. But yeah, all these, like the bakers, like that's like it's interesting. You talk about the bakers. I follow. Is it one of the baker's sons? Like, he's had a complicated life. I follow one of his things on like Twitter and Instagram and like all that stuff. And it's, he kind of went through a deconstruction of the faith phase, and he kind of got really back into the faith again, and now he's just completely out of it. And that's the thing. As a pastor for 10 years now, and it's something I try to preach on a lot, is just that sense that I think Paul is talking about with the serpent whispering in your ear, that sense of like, if you do A, you get B. You hear it in the fire and brimstone, you hear it in the prosperity preachers, you hear it a lot in the LCMS. Like, you hear it in theirs, like, well, we need to be sure we practice church just like this. It's got to be just this way. And it's, or you have to be just this, you have to think about things just like this. And it's like, what happens is like when your foundation of the faith is built upon living out those principles, when the principles fail you, then there's nothing there behind it. And you become an undocked boat in a hurricane, And that's why I had a professor in college, Y. Huxford, and he said, he basically says, like, I don't care what you believe. Just realize that the cross and Jesus on it and his resurrection is the center of your faith. And if it's not, you're going to have problems. He goes, not with me, not with, you're just gonna have issues, because that needs to be the middle of it. And I think that's what Paul's kind of getting us back to, that it's this way of the apostle, way of all that, because we've been talking about puffed up, and so we've been talking about this serpent whispering in ears, tricking Eve and all. So let's keep on going, quickly running out of time. So, for if someone comes, this is verse 4. For if someone comes and announces a different Jesus than the one we announce to you, or if you receive a different spirit, one you hadn't received before, or a different gospel, one that you hadn't accepted before, you put up with that all right. 5. According to my calculations, you see, I'm every bit as good as those super apostles. So there he is. Let me finish this paragraph. And verse 6. I may be untutored in speaking, but that certainly doesn't apply to my knowledge. Surely that's been made quite clear to you in every way and on every point. So let's see here. How does the NIV render 5? I don't think I'm at least inferior to those super apostles. Okay, yeah. Okay, so with that, the end of that verse 4, that whole idea of, if there's a different Jesus than what we have been announced to you, like that's because it's hard to say these words because it's not quite right. But one thing I tell people when they're dealing with difficulty in life and they feel like they've got to fix it or something like that. I can't remember who I was talking to. I was talking to someone that was struggling with things. And I said, you don't have to be Jesus here. Like that's like an easy one to pick on is our kids. We're worried about our kids, like they're going off and doing other things, and you worry about it. And it's like I need to make sure they're living a certain way and all that. And if they start going off another way, I'm like, oh no, like all that stuff. You're not Jesus. You're not Jesus. Stop trying to be Jesus. Like that's, you can give them Jesus, but giving them Jesus isn't like, you need to do this, like that's, and I think we do that in a lot of the kids thing is just an easy, everyone kind of understands that because everyone has that same frustration. But we do that with so many things. Like we turn Jesus into these other things of saving us. And we may not call them Jesus. Like, I think the prosperity gospel, that one, like, they definitely call Jesus something else. Like that's obvious. But, sometimes we call Jesus like our work. We call Jesus our finances. It's whatever we believe is going to save us. And here in 2 Corinthians, like, Paul is definitely getting at it right here. He's saying, if anyone announces to anything to you from a different gospel, like, don't listen to it. And he says, you see, I'm every bit as good as those super apostles you got over there. I'm every bit as good as them. Like that's and he then goes into, and we're not going to have time to go through it. Remind me that we're on verse 7. Like that's, because I know I'll forget to make a note. But and he goes into it, and he goes, these super apostles here, he goes, I may not be able to speak as eloquently as them. I may not be able to do all that, but like, I know what I'm talking about.
Still warning them.
Yeah.
Against them all.
Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. And it's been made clear to you on all these counts. So I think I guess that's a decent place to stop. It's not the best place to stop, but it's going to have to be the place we stop. And but yeah. So I think that's kind of where we're at is with him with these super apostles, and he's like, I'm as good as them, and he's about to show us why, as he reiterates what it means to be a disciple and an apostle from chapter 4 and such. So yeah, that's our lesson. That's the lesson. So do we? So it's Ed and Joanne will be down here soon. Lee is sick. It's let's see, what else is going on?
We don't have Bible study next week or the week after?
No, let's see. Yeah, I thought about doing it next week, but I have a feeling by Thursday I'm going to start. Yeah, I'll probably be. I'm trying
losing your voice.
Yeah.
We burn out.
Well, it's an odd week because, like, it's the whole week.
Yeah.
It's the whole week. But like, there are 3 things right in a row. You got Christmas Eve, Christmas, Sunday, like just pop. So I said this last night. I'll say it again today, and I'll say it again on Sunday. We have Christmas Eve, 4 and 7. I could use some readers if anyone would like to.
You don't have readers on? No.
Well, I don't have them all. I hope I have the readings on Sunday, and I'll talk to everyone.
I can do
about
Because I know Cheryl and I have.
Well, and I have a backup plan if I struggle with readers. I have those. I don't think I should struggle with it, but my backup plan is I have all 4 of those gospels that it just narrates, and they're like acting out the gospel behind it. I've thought about using some of those for the gospel readings some, and I may actually experiment with that on Christmas Eve. I got to make sure that YouTube doesn't ding us for copyright, though. So that's like that. That's with everything live stream now. I always have to worry about copyright. And but yeah. So Christmas Eve, 4 and 7. Live stream is the 4. That we're doing that.
Are you recording the 7?
No. We may. I'll probably record it if someone wants to see what. I won't make it public though, because the LCMS likes their rules, and having Pastor Kim speak is going against those rules. And so
Could you record it so we could see it?
Yeah. I'll try. I'll try to remember to record it. I'll try to remember to record it.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Yeah, and so I'll probably figure out a way to get it out to people, and then and so that's live stream. Christmas Day 10:15. Sunday afterwards, only one service 10:15, and the Sunday after that, the second of the year, 10:15 only. So those 2 Sundays after Christmas are the only ones. I'll be there for the first one. I will not be there for the second one. Even though I probably won't be far away, but I will just be coming back.
So is our next Bible study January 6th?
That's right. Do what?
Our next Bible study January 6th?
Yeah, we'll do January 6th on the next Bible study. So, and we'll probably have 2 after that. Then I don't know what we'll do after that. We're starting at the beginning of the year. We're starting our Mark sermon series, and I'm getting ready for that thing right now. And we went through a lot of my study of that Mark sermon series was this Bible study. What, 2 years ago now? It was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was, and I realized a bunch of stuff going through that Bible study. I was like, wait a second, this is we're seeing some different stuff here. So that's what's going on. So I'll close this with a prayer. Jesus, we thank you for today, and we thank you for your gospel, Lord. As we look at the worlds around us, it can be so deceiving to have the serpent whisper in our ears. And Lord, keep us steadfast in the faith that by your Spirit and by all the congregation and everyone around us, that we will be able to hold true to your eternal truths of a life that is shaped by the death and resurrection of your Son. Thank you, Father. Amen. So
Merry
thank you
Christmas
so much.
to everybody and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, everybody. That's right.
Merry Christmas, IAJ. It's about Jesus.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. We'll see you guys.
Merry
See you
Christmas,
later. And
everybody.
all those services are live streamed.
I hope you feel better.